Namaste. Welcome to our our satsang. So, welcome. First, it's commercial time, naturally, and my first commercial is this. I'll show it. All right. I'm making talks on the Bhagavad Gita, and you can access them at this address, youtube.com/Light of the Spirit, and the playlist is called Talks on the Bhagavad Gita. 20 some have been posted. Ultimately, I have an idea that there will be perhaps even 100 talks, because I've already made, I think, 76 or 77 or 78 talks on the Bhagavad Gita. All right, then, more commercial. Okay, first, this is a book that was some time ago printed, Sanatana Dharma, the Eternal Religion. Actually, it was called originally an advanced textbook of Sanatana Dharma, and was put out by Benares Hindu University, and was written by a committee of professors from the university. It's brilliant. The English is magnificent. Really, this is one of the easiest books to read I've ever read. Now, the concepts, of course, are very, very subtle, and a few readings of that would be a very, very good idea. All right, the book that I've just shown you, that was read, of course, widely in India when it was put out, which was in the year 1902. And there is an ashram in Benares called Sri Bharat Mahamandal Ashram. If that sounds vaguely familiar, it's because you've read about it in Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi. For he went to that ashram and lived there for some time in Benares. And it was under the supervision of Swami Dayananda Saraswati, who oversaw the writing of what they felt was a more complete version of Sanatana Dharma. Much more detailed, much more technical. And they named it World's Eternal Religion, which I don't think is much of a title. So we're reprinting this book, of course, as it was. We're not changing anything, but we're calling it Hinduism, the Universal Religion. Since we've already said Sanatana Dharma, the Eternal Religion, so they can be kept straight. The Sanatana Dharma, is really, I would say, the college textbook. And this is the graduate school textbook, because it's much more detailed, but brilliantly expressed. And I loved every minute I spent when I read it, and then every minute I used editing it, because there was a lot of Victorian English that just isn't used anymore today, and also for putting the punctuation. The Victorians put commas everywhere, whether needed or not, usually not needed. And so anyway, there it is. And it will take thought, and it is not simple, it is not easy. But if you can tell me anything worthwhile, and even Ursula, that's simple and easy, except it's easy to die quite frequently, but not always. So there we are. that is the book commercial. Now I have a metaphysical commercial, and I've got notes here because I don't want to miss anything. There used to be, back in the so-called golden years of television, which meant when not many people had television, I'm talking about like 1950s, there was a religious program presented by a Father Keller, a priest of the Roman Catholic Church, called The Christophers. And they had a theme song that they played at the beginning and at the end. And the opening words of this song were this: if everyone lit just one little candle, what a bright world this would be. Because Father Keller wanted to say, okay, you go to church, fine, yes, you believe certain things, but the world needs light. And you're part of this world, therefore, work to bring light into the world. A very wonderful ideal and something that, should always be in front of us. Many people are just satisfied, well, I follow Dharma, I'm a yogi, and so on. Yes, but what else is happening? And we'll be talking about that. So, one little candle. See that? That's a birthday cake candle. And now I have a very interesting story to tell you that I doubt if is written down anywhere and anyone has known. I had the good fortune to frequently visit with Durga Ma, Mother Durga, sometimes also called Sister Durga, who was one of Yoganandaji's very early disciples, who lived for many years in the ashram in Los Angeles with Yoganandaji. And it was wonderful hearing her speak about her experiences. Some are starting to come to mind, and I realize I don't let myself get distracted. If I start relaying them to you, it'll never be over. So I want to tell you one thing she told me, which I found quite amazing. She said, one day, Yoganandaji contacted several of the residents in the ashram and said, when it's getting toward evening, put on your best clothes. I want you to go somewhere with me. That was it. So they did. And there was a whole carload of them with, of course, Yoganandaji in the front. And he didn't say a word or explain anything. Off they went. And in they went down the hill and ended up at the Hollywood Bowl. And so they got out, and as they were going in, I assume somewhere they paid admission, but anyway, as they were going in, every person was given a little birthday candle and a match. And we're told, it'll be explained to you what you do with this. It was a mystery. So, and they went. And when the program was ready to begin, and you understand this was at night, of course, one of the officials of the Hollywood Bowl came out and said, please, all of you, strike the match and light the candle. And please stand up and hold the candle up. So they did, and then they turned off all the lights. And it was perfectly bright. And everyone could see everyone else very clearly. It was almost like daylight. And then he said, oh, all right, it's the birthday today of the Hollywood Bowl. So everybody sang happy birthday. So they sang happy birthday. And then as others were sitting down, Yogananda said, don't sit down, let's leave. So they went out, got in the car, and he said, this is why I brought you. This is the way it is in the world and the way with the yogis in the world. And the more yogis we have, the brighter the world will be. All right, how's that a commercial? Well, because I hope you're yogis. And if you are really a yogi, you are a candle. And you are helping the world to be bright. Yogananda said a very interesting thing. He said, wherever a master goes, an indelible mark is left in the etheric levels. And anyone who is in that place, especially those who are doing meditation, will draw from that blessing, that power that is still left there, and they'll be helped and strengthened in their sadhana. Now, you walk through the world observing your breath, intoning so when you inhale and hum when you exhale. And as I've said over and over again, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it says, in the beginning there was only the Purusha, only the spirit. And it first said, Soham Asmi, I am Soham. So the mantra Soham evokes the consciousness Soham. Soham Bhava it's called, which is God's Bhava and ultimately should be totally the Bhava of the yogi. So wherever you are, God is there. Living presence. And wherever you move, wherever you are, the light of God is there. And even when you leave from that place, there will still be a remainder there vibrating to help whoever enters that place again. You want to be a savior of the world? Be a Soham yogi, and you will be a savior of the world. This isn't just pretty talk, and isn't it inspirational? Isn't it wonderful? It's the truth. You are healing the world. The more the meditation and the more constant the japa outside of meditation, the more you are, if you want to say, redeeming the world. I mean that quite seriously. I don't mean this is a pep talk. You didn't give me any money to learn it. And so I'm not peddling it, am I? But I'm encouraging it. Now, Swami Brahmananda, the most advanced disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, people usually think of Vivekananda. He was the most renowned. But everyone said, even Vivekananda, that the most advanced was Swami Brahmananda. Swami Brahmananda said, in discussing japa, he said, when the mantra is repeated, a current of spiritual energy is generated, and it moves outward from the yogi, hopefully in a continuous stream. That's my words. And he said that impulse moves outward throughout the whole cosmos. And when it comes to the very edge of, again, the manifested creation, it starts moving backwards. So you get two for the price of one. In other words, he didn't say that, but there's not just a going out, it's a going out and a coming back, and therefore touching everything in the cosmos. Think about that. People think they want to make a mark in the world. Well, forget anything as tiny as the world. You, as a Soham yogi, you're marking the cosmos. So he says, and then it comes back, and it comes back to the yogi. So it benefited you as you were saying it, and now it benefits you as it returns to you. So is there anything more important in your life that you could do than that? None that I can know of. But this is a fact. So you are uplifting not just every person in the world, you're uplifting every object in the world. And most of all, your own self, your own consciousness, by this continuous sadhana. Therefore, I have here my note, just therefore, ... One of my also favorite quotations from the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, be a yogi. This is how, in the 18th chapter, Krishna said so much, and so much profound wisdom, and so much knowledge, and practical advice, and then sums it up. Therefore, be a yogi. This is why you're a yogi. And this being so, if you're not a yogi, you're wasting it. So, that's a commercial. Yes, I'm not asking you for money, but I'm selling you Soham Sadhana, the japa, and the meditation. Yeah. Now for a bit of a brag. Little Jack Horner sat in the corner eating the Christmas pie, stuck in his thumb and pulled out a plum and said, "What a good boy am I." All right. Swami Nirmalananda is a good boy. Therefore, a yogi friend made this for me. This is Soham in Sanskrit, carved in cypress wood. And especially like the way the top part is light, because there's always a horizontal line on top of the Sanskrit letters, which, by the way, are called Devanagari, which means city of the gods. And it said the gods sit on Sanskrit. They sit on the sounds of the alphabet. So here it is. You have to forgive me. This program makes everything look backwards. Like, to me, this is my left hand. But on the screen it's coming out right. I don't know how it appears to you. So anyway, let me see if I can manage. Okay, no. Okay, S, O, it's the way it's written. The letter O is not, there's a line that indicates O sound. And then H, ha. And always is considered that unless another letter is indicated between every consonant, there is the vowel short A, So it's hum. So hum. Now you see, we have a shrine to Shiva, and we put this above the shrine. We only took it out just before we began, so I could show it to you. But we keep it there, and we see it continually. And there it is, reminding you, Soham. Now the same friend got even more creative and sent us this. And there you see it more as written. This is fused glass. He put all these elements into it and fused it somehow. I have no idea how, but he did, and it was successful, and here we are. And I am facing toward the east as I'm talking to you. I'm facing toward the east wall of this room, where I have a large, taller than 4 foot picture of Jesus as a yogi in meditation posture. And this is put above it. So that fortunately I get to face Soham all the time. I'm here in the office, and all the time I'm in our living place upstairs. I'm also seeing Soham. I'm very grateful for it. And I say thank you, thank you, thank you. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to make your own reminder. For example, you just print it out on your computer. There we are, Soham. And somehow put it up somewhere, or write it like on a little note card. And where you work, just put it down somewhere, say like I'm at a desk. So it's there, at least in the peripheral vision, and you can remember. It's a good idea to do this. I think I've told you in my bragging that when I first learned japa, I understand it's got to go on all the time. I thought, well, how am I going to make sure of that? So I would put a small rock in my shoe. And I would feel it. It wouldn't be agony or pain, but it wasn't particularly comfortable. But then I remembered to do so. If that's what it took, that's what it took. So I would do that. Then, of course, later, I got one of these, and not this particular one, but then I had it. And then for a while, what I did was, people are used to fiddling. People are nervous all the time. And so some friends I knew had what they call rubbing stones. They were small things, and you just it was real smooth, and people kind of rubbed their thumb. I think it's perfectly silly, but anyway, people did it. And I thought, well, now, wait a minute. And so I just got a few, because knowing I might lose one, I got a few beads. And then I just had a bead in my, did like that, and so I was able to remember. And there's nothing like it. I call this my lifeline, because I can keep going. When I read, when I'm doing things that are not speaking, because that's difficult when you're speaking, there I have it. I don't let go of it, so I don't let go of the japa. Because that is life. The Soham breath, if there is a breath of life, that is it. Now, let me see. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at the time. I hope you'll have time for the whole thing. Here I've taken up half an hour or so. But anyway, you can come back to it. We'll be posting the satsang also. And you can see that. All right, now to the questions. Ahimsa and Satya. That's nice. Ahimsa and Satya, both essentials of both the requisites for yoga. How to handle conflict resolution, especially with relatives and family members. With as little conflict as possible, but don't think you're obligated to make there be no conflict. They've got some responsibility too. And if they want to be old soreheads about you being a yogi, you know something? That's just their tough luck. I'm serious. You know, loving someone doesn't mean they can trample all over you and you let them do it, or you can let them bully you. I remember there was one very close family member who was tiresome about me being a yogi. So I just said, I don't have to bother with this nonsense. You keep it all to yourself. When I got up, I left. Left. And then a day or so, I went back and I came in and said, if you're ready to show respect to me, I'm back for a visit. If you're not, I don't need to see you again. And that was it. Sometimes you have to get tough. You understand? Your family bullies you continually as a rule. You don't realize it because you think, oh, they love me and so on and so on. But no, who are they? Especially, you're an adult now. You're not a child. So when new monks come to the ashram, I say, there's one absolute rule I want you to keep. Not that there aren't others, but there's. You don't give any guff to anybody, and you don't let anybody give you guff. I said, no, I mean that. You don't let anybody here, just because they've lived here longer, give you any grief. I remember one time I was walking toward the back hall, and I heard two monks going, I stood there and I just loved it, and I listened. I thought that's the way it ought to be. Don't take any crap. One, I didn't know who was the bully and who was the bullied, but you understand, they didn't fight each other, hit each other, and they didn't end up hating each other or leaving, saying, well, I can't live with people like this. No, they got it out in the open. So there's nothing wrong with it. Be straightforward. If you have to, a bully has to be related to like a bully, not like a kind person who cares about you. So sometimes the conflict cannot be resolved if it's all on their part and not yours. And don't you figure that you should die spiritually, inwardly, for those people. If that's their idea, they're the worst enemies you have in the world. I don't care if mommy held you in her lap and nursed you and so on and so on. Right now, she's the devil. She's the devil. And Jesus said, resist the devil and he'll flee from you. But sometimes to resist the devil in the human form, you've got to flee. Leave. Oh my God, you're a monk. You damn right I'm a monk. But more than a monk, I'm a yogi. Oh, I swore. Oh, no. So for heaven's sakes, when Saint Polycarp was arrested, he was living in Egypt, and he was taken to Rome for the purpose of being fed to the lions and for the amusement of the wonderful, open, and cultured Romans, who would never be negative like the Christians, for them to watch me beaten. And as he was entering the door, a voice spoke from heaven and said, Polycarp, quit yourself like a man. I don't care, you who are listening, you may be women, but quit yourself like a man. Be a soldier. And soldier on. So you're under no obligation to make people feel good and help them understand. They don't want to understand, or they can't understand because their minds are darkened. The light has come into your mind. If you want to put the darkness back in, you just conform to those people and you give in and say, oh, how could I owe them everything? You owe God everything. You've had parents from life to life, families from life to life. They all died. You died. Where was your wonderful familial ties? And it was nowhere. So doesn't that tell you something about the nature of it even now? I'm very straight talking. However, if you don't want to, give in, become a nothing. Ultimately, you will stop doing the japa and meditation, and you'll just go and be a pig in the sty, eating the slop of the world and enjoying yourself. Fine, why not? Why should I bother you? It can be difficult because the truth can hurt. The truth only hurts people that have got a sore soul. And if the truth hurts them or hurts you, well, they and you should bite the bullet and put up with it. You know, let me tell you something. No one in this world is yours, and you aren't anyone's in this world. Ultimately, Yogananda told of experience where he was shown all he could have if he just take it. And God asked, "You want it?" And he said, "I said, no, God. I came with you and I will go with you." He was loving and merciful. People never knew such love as the love from Yogananda. And there he was living with many disciples who were dedicating their lives to the search for God. But he said to them all one time, "Do you think I'm attached? When Divine Mother calls, I will turn around and walk away from all of this and never look back." Now that's a yogi. Anything less is not a yogi. It's just a piddle around and a phony. So, wake up. That's how it is. That's how it has to be. There are people that want to be children all their life. They don't want to grow up. They want to always be at home with mommy and daddy. And there are these pathetic people, especially men. They're 50 years old. They're living home with mom and dad, usually in the basement. And they can't get away. Well, whatever entraps you is bad for you. So, talk about cut the cord. You know, you won't really love anything or really own anything until you are detached from it and you don't identify with it anymore. And that includes people. This I can tell you. All right, that's been a long one. Can you explain the difference between spirit and soul and where they are located? Well, the problem with spirit and soul is people have such different ideas, such different definitions of the two. It seems, for example, if we're looking in the Bible, that soul means the subtle bodies, the astral and causal bodies, the higher makeup of the individual, as opposed to the physical, the body. And the spirit is the pure self, the pure Atman that is inhabiting this, all the causal, astral, and physical bodies. And that's the life giver. Once the spirit leaves, well, then it dies. The so-called soul really dies. We're used to spirit and soul being synonyms, but in reality, in the Bible, that distinction is there. As far as located, Well, of course, the soul is here in the body as part of it and can't really, it's integrated here, but when the body dies, it can move on. Then the spirit also, but it's ever free. It will ultimately leave the soul and go back into its nature, where it came from, as pure spirit. And the spirit, and the real spirit, is located kind of all around you. It's sort of enwrapping you. And then, of course, but the body and all the subtle bodies, they drop away, and then that remains. You've spoken of meeting associates of Mahatma Gandhi in your visits to Bharat. Could you tell us any stories they told you about Gandhi? I had the good fortune to meet a really great person in his own right. We called him, I don't know what his full name, we would call him Kaka Sahib Kalelkar. Kalelkar, of course, was his family name. Just hardly a week or so ago, I read a reference to him and it just called him Kalelkar. Anyhow, he was one of Gandhiji's secretaries. And he didn't go to prison with him, but he went and stayed outside the prison in some place where he could live. So did the other secretaries. So they stayed outside, but in early morning, they were allowed to go in and they just go into his cell with him. And he would dictate letters and so on. And Gandhiji's life actually very peacefully, uninterrupted, just continued right there in jail. So the jail was a heaven, wasn't it? So anyway, he said that when the day was over and they were to leave, that Gandhiji always in the evening, as well as, of course, early morning, took a bath. And so they put the things he needed for his bath, a towel, etc., and so on, etc. And on his pillow, they would put his japamala, which, of course, was 108 one. Not little like this, but they put the japamala there because that's what he did all night. They felt perhaps he never slept. And he just did the japa. So he said every morning when we came, by the way, Kakasai was not an emotional type of person. He was very logical. So he wasn't being poetic. He said every morning when we came, we met a different man. He said literally every day we saw him become greater and greater and greater and more the embodiment of divine light and consciousness. He said we watched him being transformed. Yes. And if he can do it, you and I can do it. Can you share what is karma yoga and how we can implement it in our daily lives? Karma yoga can be looked at two things. First is what you're doing. In other words, right deeds, good deeds, done unselfishly. Now, they say with no desires and so on. Well, if you want to help somebody, you desire to help them. So it's silly to say, oh, that's what the Gita is telling us not to do. No, you do it with detachment, meaning, Lord, it belongs to you. The result, I give to you. But it is right action with the attitude, this is ultimately for God. And secondarily, for the love of those I'm acting toward, or for the purpose of which, or the uplift of whom I'm acting. It's actually not difficult at all. Oh, psychologically, it's difficult. But, excuse me, I should be marking off these things so I don't have to keep finding my spot. So that's just how you do it. And again, don't forget, oh Arjuna, be a yogi. Because this is a real tightrope walk through life. The yogi can do it. People can try and try nobly and succeed. But it can better be done by the yogi. Could you elaborate on the various merits of long hair versus shaved head for yogis/monks? Yes, it's easy. Your hair is literally, it won't sound nice, especially people that get their hair all fixed and so on. Your hair is brain excrement. As you think, as you're thinking and you're experiencing, and all this process goes on in your brain, literally there are byproducts. I mean, literally, there's excretions. Of course, it's not the same as what comes out in the toilet, but still. And it grows. And rate of hair growth often tells us about brain activity. And the texture even of the hair. Now, I don't want to talk more because I've known people that have tried to artificially make things be the way I would describe, and that, of course, was idiotic. So as it is, so it is. But the hair is highly magnetic. Oh, I have held in my hand Yogananda's hair. I mean, decades after he had left the body. But I, a couple of times, met people, they had somebody's hair. And to just touch it, whew, I'm telling you, you talk about elevation. So the hair is greatly magnetic. And all your daily thoughts and your experiences and so on, they go up into the hair, sort of come out in the record of the hair. So there's two ways to look at it. I'm a yogi. I continually do japa. I daily meditate, and therefore my hair is magnetized, and it's like keeping a holy object near, a magnetized object. And it's right here on my head, which is the source of my thought and the center of my consciousness. Therefore, I will never cut my hair, because every japa I've ever done and every meditation I've ever done will be there. The other idea is, well, I don't just meditate all day long. I go through this and that. I read things, I see things, I talk to people. Sometimes I think, oh, or I feel, or even elated. And that all goes into the hair. And so, once a month on the full moon day, this is important. On the full moon day, the whole magnetic bodies are vibrating more than at the other time. So they shave the head to be rid of it, be rid of that conditioning that took place in the previous month. And that's a very, very legitimate idea, and it's very good. And the other was, I'm holding on to my hair to retain the vibrations of the sadhana. That also is good. Which is better? I think for the monk, the monthly, let's chuck it, let's get rid of it. For in a sense, all that sadhana you've done, we're right here and now, it's not there. The effect is there, but all that process isn't here and now, so well, you can get rid of it. So the head is shaved, so uses the face. I notice I ought to shave. You can see a little bit of hair there too. So the yogis tend to think, let me keep the hair. And the sadhus, the monks, think, let me get rid of the hair. Now, if you're a monk yogi, well, then you decide. And you know, nothing of this should ever be made a big absolute or a fetish about. Also, would you explain why it's important for a monastic to wear a habit or equivalent? Well, why does a policeman wear a uniform? Why, at least in the old, better days, did nurses wear uniforms? And doctors also. And there are many kind of professions where people wear a uniform. They have a certain dress. There's even when you go to the hospital and you're a patient, you put on one of those god-awful little things. But you need it because it works in that environment. So, this is the purpose. Also, and why does a soldier wear a uniform? He can go out and fight without a uniform. It's because when he has a uniform on, it is what we call a thought form. A book is itself an intelligence thought form, you see, or an information thought form. And it really is literally so. Those depictions of the deities behind me, they're very valuable because they are basically vibrating energy, and this one is the vibrating energy of Ganesh, and this of Durga. And then there's Anandamayi's photograph there. And there is, of course, Shiva there. Virgin Mary up above. So that vibration is there. And so, is the form of a uniform. So, when you put on the soldier's uniform, and you live in it, you notice that soldiers don't put it on only in battle times or time for a parade. Because 100% of the time, they have to know, I am a soldier. I have taken up this obligation. So, a uniform keeps you always mindful of that's what I am. Yes, you're walking around and nobody else has one maybe, but you. Well, that's because they aren't what you are, but you've decided to be. That doesn't mean you're better than them, but it does mean you're different, I hope. Therefore, the monastic clothes are very important to just remember that's what I am. And the color is important because color is vibration, you see. And this color, the Garawa color, orangey color, literally it has a vibration. You see, when anything decays, it emanates an orange color. A clairvoyant person could see this. We don't think of decay as very good, but it's disintegration in a sense of loosening. And just as when we die, we're freed from the body. So, this color from ancient times, this color is also the color of fire. Fire isn't red. When we were little kids, we took a red crayon and it was supposedly fire, but fire is orange. There was no such thing as a red fire. So you're living in a fire color. Why? Because you must be burning at all times ignorance, delusion, and the things that come piling on you through daily life that can distract you. And it's also a transmuting force, fire is. So you should be on fire all the time, in a sense, transmuting. Now, we get wiseacres, even here. And it's interesting, they like to come and say, may I ask you a question? And say, oh, I'm so polite. And then, do you think it's right to wear clothes that make you stand out from other people and make people notice you? Well, first of all, Why not? Don't you have any imagination? Can't you think somebody might like that? It's not our motivation, but well, so what? What if it was? None of your business. You don't wear them, and it's not going to hurt you to look at it. So these idiots do. But of course, we usually say, and do you think it's the right thing to hassle people who have dedicated themselves to an ideal for dressing and clothing that reminds them of the ideal? Oh, they don't expect that, see? Because they think if you search for God, you're really a fool. Fundamentally, they don't believe in God. I don't care if they go to church 20 times in a day. They don't really believe in God. So if you do something that says God is real and it's here and now, and I'm acting so, it's like, oh, what are you doing that for? Why are you interfering in my world? And why are you reminding me? Okay, why did you take up that life? But what about the other question? Why don't you? Yeah, I'm not saying everybody's supposed to do it, but all right. I was willing to say, dear God, I won't have all these things I could have because I want to come directly to you. And you say, well, I'm a household yogi. Yeah, and watch a lot of them. I met great people, married families, children, have become yogis. But guess what? Only about 1 in a few million, if not billion. And that's the truth. It says in the Bible, can you take fire in your bosom and not be burned? Okay, can you sit down in the mud and not get dirty? You know, if you haven't grokked the real nature of this world, well, for heaven's sakes, go look at a news program. Why are you wasting your time with me? Okay? So it is important. Very important. Indeed. It can be I've heard of people, for example, this happened. There is a real story that's been written in a book in Greece. And there was a man who just really liked to have a bit of booze every so often, and he went and lived in a monastery, and so he was dressed in monastic clothing. And boy, he really wanted to drink. He wasn't an alcoholic. So off he went to go down to get some booze, and suddenly he thought, it's plenty good for people to not drink alcohol. What are people going to think when they see me, a monk? Not the idea is that they'll think I'm a bad person, but they'll think that this is all right. And I know really in my heart this isn't all right. So he turned around and went back and never thought of doing that again. So you see, his monastic clothes, the monastic clothes tells you, people are watching. If that's what it takes, it may not be noble and high. Have nothing to do with the people who say, well, like you should only need to be able to say the mantra once and attain illumination. Look at their lives, look at their minds. I have a particular person in mind. If there ever was anybody that was a worm burrowing in the mud, it was that man. And he hated the idea, for example, of saying mantra. And it would say, well, you only need to say it once. Okay, you say it once and let's see what you become. That's what my friend should have said to this character. Why say character? Fool. All right? Swami Sivananda said in Sadhana that sannyasis should wear the holy thread even under threat of death. I can't imagine this because sannyasis don't wear the sacred thread. So I have nothing to say about that. If you're a Brahmin, you should wear the Yajna and die rather than let anyone take it off of you or you give it up, of course. But Jesus in the Korean Gospel said one shouldn't wear pious garb. I don't remember that. Maybe it does. Why don't you send it to me? Tell me what chapter and what verse he says. Now, you can do it for a show. There are people, there are sociopaths in India. They say, "Oh, the monks are at the top. Everybody, everybody supports them. People give themselves. Why not me?" And they go and they get some cloth dyed garrow and they put it on. They fake they're a monk and they're not a monk. And they look holy. Yes, they put the sign on. That happens. But that's like saying, just because some people pretend to believe in God, nobody needs to believe in God. You don't have to believe in God. There are fakes. Of course there are fakes in everything. Just like the fake people that pretend they're spiritual and religious like to hassle monks about what they do and what they wear. Oh, yes. So, yes, Jesus says in the gospel, they like to have big borders in their clothes and all that. And he said they're hypocrites. But what if they weren't hypocrites? What if they were genuine people and they were really religious and following? Because Jesus said they did it hypocritically. He didn't say the doing of it was wrong. See? Yeah. Okay. How do you explain emptiness in the Heart Sutra? There's no explanation because it is a condition beyond. And it isn't sitting blank like someone that's had a bullet through their brain so they can't think anymore. The silence. There is nothing but silence all the time. My talking, you know. In me, in the depths of me, and in the depths of you, there is silence. And the sound, that's all superficial. So you're living in this silence right now. But this emptiness, I remember a Thai Buddhist abbot that we were good friends with, just loved it. See, the Thais consider Mahayanas to be, we'll say, unnecessary about certain things. My friend Reverend Somaloka used to say Mahayana Buddhism is a jungle. And I'm not saying that so, but that's what he said. So anyway, they learned that there was, we told him about Mahayana nun who was called Sister True Emptiness. And he laughed because he thought it was great. Because in his opinion, she was right. She was empty. So I've gotten out of it because, I can't explain it to you. It means absence of all things. And yet, you have to be alive. You don't die when you get in that state. Therefore, be a yogi. Therefore, be a yogi. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. And anyway, nobody needs a definition. They need to get it. In recent days, my thinking position is not stable and not interested to live in this world. Can you please help me? No. You need to deal with someone directly, not me, who am just a face, just for these minutes on the screen. I had a young Indian man come one time to the ashram who was in real mental trouble, and he had mental confusion and a lot of problems, and it was very sad. They were very real. And I went to India. I met his mother and father, and his mother cried and said, "Please save my son, please save my son." Well, that, as you could imagine, shall we say, affected me. So when I went back, I thought, all right, I promised, I said, I'll do my best. So we went back. He, by the way, was going to a psychologist, blah, 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 and he was on medication. I said, go home. Go home. Go home. And there you consult with somebody. So he went back And he went to Delhi. His family was from New Delhi. He went to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He was examined by a psychiatrist who said the medication that was prescribed you in America is causing all your problems. Listen, there are people that prescribe medications that will give you problems, so they'll have you on their analyst couch or in their clinic the rest of your life. Now, I don't mean everybody does that, of course not, but it does happen. And that was being done to this young man. And so he stopped it, and everything was all right. And he wasn't the first one that I have said to people, why don't you quit that stuff for a while? And they quit, and in half an hour, they're all right. No, there are racketeers. Getting an MD or a degree in psychiatry doesn't mean you're a good or an honest person. I knew a man whose psychiatrist, this was in California, got him addicted and would not give him more than 2 weeks' supply of the whatever it was, because he didn't want him to leave town. And he came to visit us. He flew to visit us and said, well, I'm going to have to go back in about 10 days because my prescription runs out. Well, I thought, look, he should be able to figure it. I didn't say anything to him. But that evil man, under the guise of being a person who could help, had addicted to him and kept him like that way, and kept him a slave. Beware, beware, beware. This world is a minefield. The smart thing is jump over it. Be a yogi. Yeah, that's how. So, but find someone you can trust and have them really see a dharmic person. I can tell by your name, you're Bharati, and if you can't find anybody, if you're living here and you can't find anybody, take my advice that I gave him. Go home. I would sell my soul to be able to go into India and be a citizen and live there. But my evil karma doesn't let me have it. You've had the good karma to be a Bharati. For heaven's sakes, take advantage of it. All right. Is there I'm going to answer all the questions. This has asked me about a certain kind of pranayama. Personally, I don't know the name and what it is, but, and IK time is cited, I urge you to avoid all pranayama of all kinds, because it does not benefit in the long run, and in most times it is detrimental. And I'm not saying this on my own. In fact, Papa Ramdas of Kanangad wrote about this, how it began messing his whole spiritual life up, because he met a Raja Yogi. He said, oh, you need to know pranayama. He thought, fine. And it messed things up for him. Stay away, because messing with your nervous system this way, if you want to help your nervous system, you start out in the depths with japa and meditation, not with breathing of any kind. I'm telling you absolutely truth, and you don't have to believe me. But anyway, so it is. It seems Maharaj lived a very private and secluded life. How were you able to obtain the info from his life? I assume you meant Sri Gajanana Maharaj. Well, that's because someone during his lifetime, wrote a biography. And it was printed, I think, around 1946, 48. And it's called Light on the Path of Self-Realization. If you do a search for that title, Light on the Path of Self-Realization, you do a web search, you'll find it. It's posted a couple of places. You can download it and read it. A lot of it is very tedious information about the not yogi sampradaya and so on, but that's fine. Just start and read, and you can skim a bit, and then when you come to Maharaj, look at it. Well, it's very good. This is why we print the book Light of Soham, because our book Light of Soham is all the relevant material extracted from that book. I don't have a copy to show you. It has Gajanana Maharaj's face on the cover. But see, you can download this also from our website, ocoy.org. You don't have to buy it. So the truth is, all the things related to Maharaj is in that book, Light of Soham, and also the inspired wisdom of Sri Gajanana Maharaj, another book that we put out, has then all the teachings together. So, and that too, you can get from our website, so you don't even have to buy it. Please share with some stories about your healing grandmother. Well, you see, she lived utterly ordinarily. You understand? I, as a tiny child, I mean tiny, so short I could walk underneath the dining room table. I saw how whenever the neighbor lady from across the street came, and she used to come 4 times a day as much of the time. Seems nuts, doesn't it? But you see, God had this happen. So my grandmother would know these things. And she'd say, such and such gone to the hospital, or they're going to have to go, or they're seriously ill, and so on. And when she would tell that about anyone, then when Mrs. Morford left, went back across the street, my grandmother would go in her room. She would close the door. And in just a day or two, I'd find out they were well. Well, I, a teeny child, saw that. So when I went to live with her, which was when I was at the end of high school and when I was in college, I said, look, I see you do this. And she said, yes. And she told me, for example, how she was raised a woman from the dead. Though she swore to secrecy about it, but it had happened. Now, I never said to her, what do you do? Can you believe that? I never asked her, what do you do? So about my grandmother, but you see, she lived just ordinary. Nobody thought she was special. Everyone loved her. They thought she was very good and dear. Actually, at her funeral, we had a minister who thought everybody was a terrible sinner. And he offend people constantly. I mean, people in town, people who didn't even belong to the church, he'd like tell them what idiots he thought they were and so on. And he would really, finally, nobody talked to him, nobody had anything to do with him. And he did almost destroy the church. I remember the Sunday that he started and with his sermons, it was terrible. So, he got kicked out of being the minister of our church, but he didn't leave town. I don't know what he did for a living. And he was there, a nuisance. And sometimes, if there was no minister, if we were between them, because, that's how it is with the Protestants, they change around the furniture. And if somebody died, then he preached their funeral. He always, as Aunt Faye would say, preach them into hell. If they hadn't been churchgoers and so on, well, you learned what he thought was going on with it. And my dear Aunt Faye used to say, I'll haunt you to the end of your days if when I die, you let him preach my funeral. So when my grandmother left the body, well, he was the only one in town. So we all went braced, because sometimes if he didn't want to just preach him in hell, he talked about the grief and sorrow of death. And I wish I had sympathy for those behind. That was the most positive he got. So we were braced. And he got up in the pulpit and said, my text is from the book of Revelation. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. And he started to cry. He was a tough, mean man. He started to cry. And he said, this woman was absolutely a perfect human being. I knew her for 40 years, and she did not have a single fault. Well, we were in a state of shock, you can imagine. But he told the truth. I just can't explain it to you. Well, the incredible atmosphere. And when you would walk into the house, you went into another world. But there are any particular incidents I just can't think of. And yes, I will tell you, my great-grandfather Burke was revered as like the spiritual leader of the entire countryside in a huge area around him. In fact, we went to some of us of our family, went to Kentucky and the area where he preached, and he actually had something like 5 or 6 churches simultaneously he worked with. And he, of course, had been dead, I don't know, since, well, he wasn't even alive. And he would have been dead for nearly 50 years. And all we had to do was say his name, and everybody knew who he'd been. And we say, where are the churches he used to take care of? And they'd say, okay, here, 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 here. And we went and looked at them. Some of them, one was a log cabin. It had been long abandoned, but they had kept it because he had preached there. And all the chinking had come out from the cracks, but there it was. So, both of my grandmothers were visionaries and miracle workers, and he woke both of them up. With my father's mother, it was one day, to her parents' absolute shock, he showed up at her parents' house and said, my son wants to marry your daughter. Would you let her do so? Well, it was like having, Martin Luther ask, marry his child or some equivalent for Protestants. And they said yes. And I mean, sorry. So she went, and my grandfather was at that time living in his parents' house. So she lived with my great-grandfather. And he awoke her and taught her. And she used to say, I was not a human being until he got hold of me. Well, she was more than a human being when I knew her. So she progressed. And with my grandmother, she was at a church meeting, what they call revival meetings, okay? Just a young woman, of course, unmarried. And at one point, he stood up to speak. And she said he shone with light. He was very, very old at that time. And she said she was just awed at the very sight of him and the very sound of his voice. She never met him, even ever seen him before. She heard about him. He's famous. Well, at the end of the church service, he came right straight over to her and said, "Young woman, what is your spiritual condition?" Well, she belonged to one of these everybody's got to be a sinner churches. And they actually said, as a point of doctrine, you'd never know if you were saved or damned until you were dead. Seems rather late. So she tried to give him that nonsense. He said, "No. You can know what your spiritual condition is. You go home, and I don't want you going to bed tonight until you have found it out." And she never described what it was she did or what happened. But she lit up. And that's what she was. So sometimes you do need a teacher, but you needed the right one. But he woke both of them up. And I'm telling you, they still lived in that light. And she was guileless. My grandmother was guileless. In fact, my father got a tape recorder, and one time I was sitting in the kitchen with her. We were eating supper, and I turned it on. My grandfather was dead by then, so there were just the two of us. And recorded her, and when I played it back, it was amazing because it was like listening to a child talk. I don't mean in a sense of just simplistic, but her voice, everything. It was like she was like an angel child. That's all I could say. Now, my grandfather, whom I adored tremendously, but was an awful person in a certain way. I mean, he was a scrupulously honest person, truthful, but he scared people to death. But let's not go into that. He thought she was an idiot because, one, you could tell her any lie, she'd believe it, because I don't think she told a lie in her life. She knew there were lies. She knew there were liars. But she just couldn't think you're a liar when someone lied. And so she was guileless, very simple. If she hadn't been simple, she should have beamed him over the head a long time before. But she didn't. There are bullies that are like that. If you're nice to them, then they think you're a fool. And in a way, you are. So anyway, so what can I say? Yes, she told me experiences she had with God, but I won't tell them. She wouldn't want me to tell them. After her death, I found records. I mean, she talked to God like I'm talking to you. But you're not able to talk back to me, but God could talk back to her, and he did. And after her death, I found drawings of visions she had had, and then some conversations she'd have with God. I burned them all. I thought, she kept this secret. She wanted this inward. I'm not going to let out any outside mind and get a chance to think, oh, well, no. So there you are. She loved. Always. So I'm going to get emotional. I would walk down the street and go up the steps and open the door. And she'd call out and say, as in there was kind of a folk story, which said, "Who's that coming in my door? Who's coming in my door?" And then I would be in. And in an aura of light and peace and wonder. No, I haven't been like it anywhere else. Anandamayi was a transcendental reality. So there's no comparison between the two. I mean, absolute divine experience with Ma, but also absolute divine experience with my grandmother, but on a level a person like myself could remember. When I was away from Ma, I could never remember what it was like because it was too subtle. Finally, I asked Brahmacharya Atmananda, an Austrian lady who came to India and had become a nun in the Anandamayi ashram and lived there. She translated the books of Ma and so on, or books of Ma's conversations. And I said to her, tell me, Avanandaji, do you find that there's this wonderful, subtle something that the moment you walk into the room where Ma is, you feel it. It's heavenly. But the moment you walk out of the room or out of the building, you forget it. You know there was some. All you know is there was something that you felt that you can't recall, that you can't bring back into your mind, the experience of it. But it was there. By the way, it took me about 15 years or more to be able to remember that that thing happened. So that was the very next time I went to India. Then I said, do you find it? She said, yes. And she had been with Ma from the mid-1940s. And she said, yes, it's vivid. But the moment Ma leaves the room or I leave the room, after a long while, I could remember that there was something, but my mind can't bring it back. And it was that way with her. In fact, I knew a devotee of Ma who was very psychically and spiritually sensitive. I mean, very. And I had one of my grandmother's handkerchiefs. And I said, here, let me give you something. I handed the handkerchief. She said, oh, Ma touched this, didn't she? I said, no, my grandmother did. She said, who was your grandmother? I said, well, I can't tell you who Ma is, and I can't tell you who my grandmother was. They were not the same. My grandmother was holiness finite, and Ma, of course, is holiness infinite. But there is an essence that is our like. Sorry. What is the difference between Jiva and Atman? None. It is the pure spirit. Now, the Atman can be in the body or out of the body. Its nature is not at all affected by being in or out of the body. It's beyond all conditioning. In one sense, it never is really in. It's not in a sense of being confined. It's just kind of localized, you might say. But an Atman in a body is considered a Jiva, and so we say Jivatman. Don't expect it to be something you really nail down, because in the East, it never is that way. There's always an infinite variety and an infinite flexibility. But they are essentially the same thing. But again, when someone says Atman, they mean the Atman, neither with, without a body, just the Atman. But Jiva means in the body as an individual. That's the best I can say, because, of course, they're unspeakable. Sri Ramakrishna said, people talk about things, in a sense, just they're talking because they don't have a full higher consciousness. They kind of muddy it, or they degrade it in a sense, or they spoil it by making less or more than really is. But he said no one's ever done that to God, because there's nothing you can say. All right. You say in the Bhagavad, in the Bhagavad Gita, for awakening, that a witness consciousness is essential for awakening. Please explain what you mean. It means you have to be centered in the Atman, in the true self. And then all your consciousness is that. In other words, nothing seizes your consciousness and sort of brings you like in a whirlpool into it. In fact, I've read people's descriptions who are advanced yogis who said that often when you're out of the body and the time has come for incarnation, then you're drawn to that place where your intended parents are. And it is at the time of sexual relations. And a kind of whirlpool is spreading out, is produced. And that you come near and it suddenly, you experience, this is what Yogananda told about, you're whirled around, and next, there you are in the body. You may be asleep at that time, then you'll fall asleep, or you may still be fully awake and you realize, here I am, back again, flunked, have to come to the, what our friend Ben Bibb called this dumb world, kindergarten world. I'm back in it. And so this is, and then you become body conscious as mind conscious. So if you can, even while in the body, pull back and just have that pure awareness, which is only possible in meditation, then it's good to do. And after a while, you keep it. If you don't, just like there's kind of a thumbprint, or think of, you can touch something and there's something left there, say a dog can smell. It's there. So it's sort of like you can all the time have kind of a residue of that. You won't be fully centered in it. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what's going on out there. You wouldn't want to know. So you can keep a hint of that. And that's a witness consciousness. Sorry if that isn't too satisfactory. Because, see, it's so hard to talk about. Because we're speaking about the unspeakable. Because it isn't just God who's indefinable and indescribable. It's you too, as you are. Because you and God are one. Okay. Does the personality survive death? Yes. Because it is centered in the astral and causal bodies. And you retain it. And you have it when you come back into it again. Now, if you spend a long time in the astral world, you may develop and change and evolve there so that, and you have those astral and causal bodies there, so they are modified by the change. You go into higher worlds and just do a lot of meditation, then you come back. So it's not like an absolute and you're not frozen in it or stuck in it. But the sense of asmita, I am, that stays forever. That never goes. And you've always had it. And the lower, for example, you and I may have been murderers or thieves, liars in previous lives, and now we're not. So you could say, well, that personality is gone or this is here, but really it's like just clay. And you can model it into all kinds of shapes at different times. And so certainly some of the subtle energies drop away and new energies come in. But there is a continuity. And then through meditation or through there are actual methods. I won't talk about and describe them. That's something else for people to look up. But you can remember your past lives. All right. Here is a question which I'm going to answer through an email. Tristan, I will, might not be today, but tomorrow or a day after, I hope, because this is a very lengthy question and something that cannot be answered just right off the top of my head. In other words, I, the artificial sage, am going to have to think on it. So, having blown my cover completely so that you know that's the way it is, well, we're at the end. And it has been an hour and 34 minutes. The good thing about it is it get posted on the internet, and therefore people can look at it at leisure. Those that have left through tedium can come back if they want. And you can recall it. So thank you very much. I enjoy these satsangs tremendously. I don't just mean I enjoy getting able to listen to myself talk, because you are there. And you know, people who care about these things and can understand these things, they are valuable. And to know you're there makes the world not as dreary a place as it can often be when you have to take a really good square look at it. So, namaste, namaste, namaste.